All right, today we are jumping headfirst into Operation Hastings. Now, this is one of those pivotal, absolutely brutal battles from the Vietnam War that you might not have heard of. And trust me, this was way more than just another firefight. It was a major test for a whole new way of fighting a war, and it really set the stage for years of incredibly bloody conflict that would follow. So let's start with a question that gets right to the heart of the story. This place, the Song Nhan River Valley, had a name, but by the time this operation was over, the Marines fighting there would know it by a much, much grimmer one. Stick with me, and you are going to find out exactly why. Okay, so to really get what's going on here, we have to set the scene. The year is 1966, and the war is starting to heat up in a really specific place, a narrow strip of land that was supposed to be a symbol of peace, the Demilitarized Zone, the DMZ. So the whole idea behind the DMZ was simple, right? Keep the two sides apart, a neutral buffer. But the reality, by the summer of '66, it was something else entirely. It had basically become a superhighway for the North Vietnamese Army. We're talking an entire PAVN division, the 324B, using it to pour right into the south. And look, this wasn't just some rumor. The intel coming in was getting more and more alarming. First, Marine recon teams start bumping into uniformed North Vietnamese regulars, not guerrillas, but actual soldiers. Then, an ARVN unit grabs a PAVN soldier from that same 324B division, and then the clincher. They capture a lieutenant who spills the beans. The mission? To liberate Quang Tri Province. This wasn't a raid, it was a full-blown invasion. So, when you're faced with what looks like a full-scale invasion, you've got to respond in a big, big way. The plan was to launch one of the largest American operations of the war up to that point. And the whole thing, its success or failure, was going to ride on a pretty new and honestly still kind of unproven tool of war, the helicopter. This was a massive gamble. And when I say massive, I mean it. We're talking 8,000 U.S. Marines mobilized into something called Task Force Delta. And they were working right alongside thousands of South Vietnamese troops who were running their own parallel operation. So yeah, this wasn't some minor skirmish. This was a major counteroffensive. The plan itself was a classic military strategy, the old hammer and anvil, but with this brand new high-tech twist. Helicopters were going to fly one force deep into the valley. That's your anvil, the blocking force. Then, another force, the hammer, would land at the mouth of the valley and sweep in, crushing the enemy right between them. It sounds simple on paper, but trying to pull that off in the dense jungles of Vietnam, incredibly difficult. You know that saying, no plan survives first contact with the enemy? Well, this brilliant, complex plan was about to slam headfirst into the brutal reality of war, and that collision happened on day one, July 15th, a day that would be defined by absolute chaos. The trouble started almost immediately. The landing zone, LZ Crow, was just way too small for these big CH-46 Sea Knight helicopters. I mean, within 30 minutes of the first wave landing, two of them actually collide in midair and just fall out of the sky. A third one clips a tree and goes down. Then, later that afternoon, enemy fire brings down a fourth chopper, killing all 13 Marines on board. A total disaster. And there you have it. That's how it happened. With the wreckage of 4 huge helicopters littering this tiny valley on the very first day, the Marines on the ground didn't waste any time. They gave the Songnhan its grim, unforgettable new name, Helicopter Valley. So if you think things were bad in the air, well, on the ground it was a whole other level of brutal. The operation quickly fell apart into a series of just desperate, close-quarters battles for survival. And 2 of these fights in particular really show you how intense it got. Okay, so 3 days in, the main force of Marines starts to move out of that chaotic landing zone, LZ Crow, but they leave a small rearguard behind, just one company, Company K, to cover their 6. And that is exactly when the North Vietnamese spring their trap. They throw an estimated 1,000 troops against this single, isolated Marine company. What happens next is just pure desperation. The Marines had actually just filled in their foxholes getting ready to leave. Now they are frantically trying to dig them out again, while getting hammered by enemy fire. They were calling in airstrikes so close, I'm talking 45 meters away, that they were getting hit by their own shrapnel. But somehow they held on. The leadership of Captain Mondriesky and Sergeant McGinty was so incredible, so beyond the call of duty, that both men were later awarded the Medal of Honor.
A few days later, another defining firefight goes down. This time, a small Marine platoon gets ambushed while they're trying to set up a radio relay station on this remote hill. The attack is sudden, it's vicious, and the few survivors find themselves completely cut off, surrounded, and just fighting for their lives.
The fighting here was just terrifyingly intimate. Survivors said they could actually hear the enemy soldiers breathing and talking just feet away in the jungle. They reported seeing PAVN troops move among the Marine dead and wounded, methodically finishing them off. And in the middle of all this horror, Lance Corporal Richard Pittman grabs a machine gun and charges the enemy to save his buddies. It was an act of unbelievable courage, and for that, he too would receive the Medal of Honor. Okay, so Operation Hastings officially wraps up on August 3rd, after almost 3 solid weeks of this kind of brutal fighting. But what did it all add up to? What was the result? And maybe more importantly, what did it all mean for the future of the war? Well, first let's look at the cost, because the price paid on both sides was just staggering. Allied forces had 147 killed in action. North Vietnamese losses were estimated to be much, much higher, somewhere around 700 killed. By any measure you can think of, this was an incredibly bloody fight. So what was the final verdict from the top brass? Officially, the military called Hastings a qualified success. Now, that's a really important term. It basically means, yeah, you accomplished your main goal, but it came at a tremendous cost, and it created a whole bunch of new problems you didn't see coming. And that's exactly what happened here. The operation did what it set out to do. It stopped the invasion cold and threw the 324B Division back across the DMZ. Huge win. But it also proved something much bigger and much more ominous. North Vietnam had absolutely zero intention of respecting the demilitarized zone. So this one battle kicks off a massive buildup of U.S. forces all along that border, setting the stage for years and years of intense fighting to come. And I want to leave you with this last thought, a quote from the commanding U.S. General Lew Walt. His words just paint this incredibly stark picture of the kind of enemy the Marines faced in Helicopter Valley. In the end, Operation Hastings was a grim warning. It was proof that the war was shifting, escalating into a new, more conventional and far more brutal phase. The long, bloody fight for the DMZ had only just begun.